Hello, welcome back to Aetheral Space 12.16 Moonlight. We are back.
Dancing in the moonlight, everybody dancing in the moonlight. You know that song?
I know of it, yeah.
Yeah, that's a Toy Musashi right now. That's what's playing as he's getting beaten to death. Alright, last time on Aetheral Space there was fighting. This time on Aetheral Space. A Toy Musashi lay on the ground, cold and dead. King knelt down there, placing a finger against the swordsman's neck to check his pulse. Nothing. He was gone. Musashi's eyes were still open, gray pupils staring sightlessly from beyond the veil in Tropic. King gently closed them. Better to stop looking at this world now, with the beliefs he held intact, rather than watch them betray him. After the fall of the heroes of form, even after everything... you got, like, hella background static right now.
I don't know.
This is so sad. After the fall of the heroes of form, even after everything, King had endeavored to believe in the world around him. He'd wanted so badly for the world, for humanity, to live up to his expectations. He had been disappointed again and again and again. It was a fate he would not wish on anyone. Hey, I'm going to turn you down.
Oh, okay.
So you can make myself think. Horatio landed on his shoulder and chirped sadly. King sighed, wooden body creaking as he stood back up. "Weep not, Horatio," he said, exhaustion draining his voice. "He was happier this way." Horatio's next tweet didn't sound any less despondent. No! Hey guys, I'm gonna be taking a break from Twitter for a little bit. Slash vent! King supposed that wasn't a surprise. The parakeet had always been far more empathetic than him. Before he had rescued Horatio, the bird had been the subject of all sorts of experiments, brain tampered with until it reached a level of consciousness beyond its means, along with the ability to utilize aether. Within 10 years or so, King supposed these aether-wielding animals would become a much more common, if still bizarre, sight. Yes, time just kept sprinting ahead, didn't it? He stepped through the great doors of the cathedral onto the terrace outside, looking out at what remained of the city of Pangloss. What would you do if, like, you're walking with your young child, and all of a sudden the pitbull named princess starts flaring their aether?
I activated my ability. I would have to have an aether battle with it, there'd be no choice.
Yeah, nothing's sacred anymore.
I would have to figure out the pitbull's ability.
The storm and the flooding.
It's got like a really technical ability.
It's like super complicated. It's like for every 3 lines on the sidewalk I step
these
on,
squares have appeared everywhere. What is the purpose of them?
Yeah, it's like a color puzzle. Oh my god.
And the pitbull's not even like mauling of it, just standing there menacingly.
It just only uses it on the 3-year-old.
Yeah.
Go ahead, see if you can solve this one.
I see. So it's an ability that automatically targets infants. But because I severed my finger, it has just become a new existence separate from my own. Hence, it's younger than my child now.
Oh my god, that's his restriction. It only targets infants.
It targets the youngest target in the area.
Oh my god, that's so evil. Oh god, looking out at what remained of the city of Pangloss. The storm and the flooding seemed to be conspiring to pull it down into the ocean even faster. The filtration systems, which would usually purge the poison from the water around the city, had failed, and so the rain that fell down was blood red. Lightning crashed. In the distance, something that could have been a scream. All the history of this place, this architecture, the memories, all of it was being dragged down beneath the waves. "Caravan," King demanded, looking at the black bandage wrapped around his wrist. "Remaining contestants." The aether construct cackled back. "Little antsy, aren't you? Worried you won't win the thing? Don't worry, your old pal Caravan has got you. There are 14 contestants still remaining. Final stretch. Do your best, okay?" If King had eyes, he would have rolled them. Hadn't he already made it clear? He had no interest in going further in the Dawn contest. Horatio tweeted. "I will surrender in good time, Horatio," King assured his companion. "It's true the job is done, but I don't like the idea of leaving people to seek revenge against me. It's quite boorish." He glanced over his shoulder. "Don't you think?" F.A.! A huge mass of Morgan Noct's fog lunged out of the darkness, engulfing King and holding him right, but only for an instant. Soon enough, the fog exploded out into its base components, and the gas spread indistinct in every direction. "My apologies," said King, "but attacks like that will be entirely ineffective." Morgan landed atop the pillar-like monument in the cathedral's courtyard, his gaze flicking to the open doors behind King. No, through the doors, to the spot within the cathedral where Atoy Musazi's corpse lay. "A toy," Morgan whispered, his face pale. "Eyes on me, boy," King said, taking a thunderous step forward. "If you lose focus, you'll die." As much as Morgan hated to admit this bastard was right, he couldn't afford to think about Musazi right now. If he was lucky, the commander was still alive, but it was a moot point if this King guy was still around to finish him off. Besides, this guy's words had made it clear. He was going after Morgan next. It was do or die time. If Morgan didn't win, both he and Musazi would be killed. "I'm certain Atoy Musazi had more comrades than just you," King said, circling the pillar casually, kicking up crimson puddles with each step. "I find it hard to believe that the distractions I brought managed to dispatch the 8 phases of the turning of the air. Perhaps they've abandoned poor Mr. Musazi." Morgan's eyes narrowed. "Don't take the bait." "Or perhaps..." King stopped pacing, his head angled directly up towards Morgan. "You're the only one with such little faith in your commander to think he needs your help?" Some bait could not be resisted. F.A.! Morgan knew now that attacks using fog wouldn't work, so he didn't even try. Instead, he spread the purple smog through the area as a smokescreen, blocking King's visibility entirely. The wooden man just remained still, however, fists held ready to defend even as the purple washed over him. The moon began moving. It was true that, if this man really had killed Atoy Musazi, then Morgan was no match for him. But it was also true that, if Atoy Musazi was dead, Morgan had lost someone dear to him once again. And if that was the case, he had no choice but to become an Avenger.
Da, 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 da.
On your left.
Welcome aboard, Morgan.
Who was the Nick Fury of the 8 phases?
Musazi, I guess.
I need you for my special team. King considered his options. An aether ping was useless under the circumstances. The fog surrounding him was laced with aether, and so the response it produced would drown out anything else. He could try to jump or run away, but he didn't yet know how this fog worked. There was a chance it was set to follow him no matter which direction he moves. I just realized, because the fog's infused with aether, it would be picked up, right?
Yeah.
Could you also use an aether ping to, like, detect aether traps?
Oh, yeah.
If you're, like, exploring
Unless they've
something?
been cloaked.
How would they actively cloak it if they've left the trap alone?
So you basically, you'll be, like, if you want to cloak an infused object, you basically have to, like, infuse it twice. Because, like, the aether cancels out its own sort of signature that way.
Wait, infusion's like a one-time deal?
Well, you put your aether into it there, and if you wanted to...
I thought it was more like aether was something you continually channeled by concentrating, and then it, like, ran over and over, and it was, like, that protected and strengthened your body, and then if you stopped channeling aether, it was gone.
Well, yeah, it fades with time, basically, so that's why you continuously do it.
Okay. Sorry. I got distracted with mechanics. If that was the case, best to stay in one place rather than be blinded and lost. Still, this didn't look like a good situation for him at all. Morgan Noct had free reign to carry out as many hit-and-run attacks as he liked. He may not have been as fast as the full moon, but his speed was still nothing to be scoffed at. Without visibility, it would be difficult for King to see the young man coming. That was why it was fortunate that there was just one move guaranteed to draw Noct out of hiding. King brought his wrist up to his face and spoke, just 3 words. "Caravan," he said, injecting panic into his voice. "I surrender." The fog shifted behind King. As expected, Morgan Noct had taken the bait. It was clear. Morgan needed to kill King for his revenge, just as much as King needed to kill Morgan to avoid his revenge. There was no way he'd let his quarry escape. Oh, yeah, that's right, you get, like, teleported out, right? King whirled around, fist already shining with white aether as he slammed it into the figure before him. Their body exploded out, covering the battlefield with... Wait, that response, the sensation against his fist. That hadn't been right at all. King recognized it nearly immediately, but nearly wasn't good enough. What he had struck wasn't Morgan Noct. He had attacked a humanoid decoy of more densely composed fog, covered in Noct's war robes, little more than a scarecrow. Oh my god, he used Shadow Clone Jutsu?
Basically.
The real Morgan exploded out of the smoke behind King, a colossal greatsword of fog already clutched in his hands. Now that he'd abandoned the robes that had covered his upper half, his bare skin was covered in angry red blisters where the toxic rain made contact, but the resolve on his face was such that he hadn't even noticed. Admirable. Die! Morgan screamed, bringing the sword down. But King did not die. Bang! King had not turned around. King had swung a fist. King had not even moved his whole body. All he had done was point his finger. Silver Ratio had done the rest. The index finger had been fired off, slamming into Morgan's stomach faster than a bullet. You can tell this guy's been reading Undead. I'm here for it. Nox still stood there, sword dissipating. I love it. Sword dissipating in his grip, the hole in his body so round and wide that you could see all the way through it. Even with that, though, he tightened his grip on what remained of his blade. He opened his mouth to say something else, but King interrupted. Know when you're beaten. In one smooth and lethal movement, King turned around, seized hold of Morgan's right arm, and Silver Ratio exploded it into gore. Morgan fell backwards onto the ground, staring dumbly at the stump of his arm, at the bone protruding and blood pouring. His face, paler than ever, moved soundlessly. He could do no more than lay there as King leisurely approached. A shame, he said. A generational talent throwing their life away for ill-considered revenge. I'll send you to meet your commander now. That mouth moved again, still no words, and squatting down next to Morgan, King raised his hand for a final chop. Farewell. It was only when Morgan Nox tried the third time that he was finally able to speak. Only 2 words, but audible enough. Caravan, he gasped. Surrender! 1 second Noct was there, and the next he'd vanished, evacuated from the inner melee. Slowly, King lowered his hand. He'd thought Morgan Noct a much more earnest fellow than that, one who'd fight to the death for this vengeance. The fact he'd run away meant that he wasn't the sort of person King needed to worry about then. Fair enough. Live and let live. With a creak of wood, King stood up to his full height once again, looked out at the city being pulled into the waves, and ow! He looked down. There, protruding from the center of his chest, was a ray of pure light, a white sword, a death dealer, a radiant. Got you, snarled the toy Muzazi. Yeah, I didn't believe that death for literally even a second. A toy Muzazi had not faked his death. That would imply that he hadn't actually died. For some time there, he couldn't say how long exactly, he had ceased to exist. A toy Muzazi had indeed been a corpse strewn across the floor of the cathedral, skewered by a stone spear. His breathing had stopped, his heart had stopped. But anything that had ended could begin once again. 2 thrusters were all he needed, set on a time delay, one on either side. They pushed inwards and then relaxed. They pushed inwards and then relaxed. They pushed inwards and then relaxed over and over again, until the thrusters were no longer required. And just like that, a toy Muzazi had restarted his own heart. With a grunt, Muzazi tore his radiant
King's like, he must surely be dead. Let me listen to his heartbeats.
I had a question, by the way. I'm gonna write a note because I want to ask you about this. For after. Okay. With a grunt, Muzazi tore his radiant out of King's body, leaving a jagged, burning hole in his wooden form. There might be a comma after jagged burning, but it might also be jagged burning. King whirled around, striking at Muzazi with a fist, but the swordsman had already jumped back out of range. It wasn't as if the swordsman was unscathed. The stone spear he'd been impaled on was still inside him, the protruding parts burnt away to allow him to move. He was covered in his own blood, and his skin was pale as snow. It was hard to believe he was still standing. But that look in his eyes... So you survived, King snarled, white aether crackling around him. Oh, is aether's the same color as a toy's?
Yeah.
Oh. He didn't bother to ask how a toy Muzazi was back. The facts were that the full moon had come back to life, and he was still a threat. King only had to act with that in mind. The radiant flared in Muzazi's palms. The way you weaken my attacks, he said, voice low. There are 2 ways to get around it. The first is with an attack you don't see coming. The second... Hang on, just checking audio. The second... King interrupted him. If you managed to survive that attack, you should have surrendered and retreated. That would have been the intelligent thing to do. What do you think you can accomplish 1 foot out of the grave? What do you have left to draw upon? As the remnants of Morgan Noct's fog drifted around them, Muzazi adjusted his footing. Red rain sizzling at his hair, he exhaled. I have resolve, he said quietly, and faith that I am in the right. So long as a person has both of those in abundance, they can accomplish anything. King clenched his fist so hard that his fingers dug into his palm. For some reason, he just could not abide this man called the Toy Musashi. He was disagreeable. Taking a moment to gather his strength, King adjusted his own stance as well, one fist extended. "This world is cruel and hard and cold," he growled. "It won't yield to the naive ideals you parade around, no matter how strongly you believe in them." Musashi smiled, with lips quickly turning blue. "Is that so? You speak with the voice of one betrayed yourself. Then I'll just have to show you." He didn't move as King had expected. He didn't rush at King for a frontal attack, nor did he dive into the smoke to conceal himself again. Instead, he tensed his legs and leapt up into the air. The last of Morgan Nocht's fog cleared, and King understood. All around them, surrounding the courtyard in a ring, were 5 colossal thrusters, blazing silently up towards the sky with such force that the air around them rippled. Is he going to send the whole building into the air like a rocket ship?
Who can say?
Pillars of Moonlight. The true purpose of the fog had been to conceal this sight. So, it wasn't that Morgan Nocht had packed faith at all.
Sorry, that would be... had lacked faith, that should be.
Even seeing his commander's corpse before him, he'd sacrificed his own body to set up this ability. As the Toy Musashi reached the crest of his jump, he raised his radiant up high. Specks of light were being pulled from the massive thrusters into that blade of light. Excuse me. The weapon quickly growing gargantuan, dwarfing its wielder. So, forces built up externally, then transferred to the user when required. King saw his opening right before the sword came down. By all rights, he should have raised his hands and fired off his fingers using silver ratio. Even if they didn't finish the Toy Musashi off, he would have to deflect or dodge them, throwing off this attack. By all rights, that was the best tactical decision King could have made. Only, at that moment, looking at the shining figure in the sky, looking at that pure light, King's mind was occupied by a single thought. Oh, there were such people once, weren't there? The sword came down. Yes, it was just as Toy Musashi had said. The second way to get around silver ratio was to unleash an attack so powerful it didn't matter how much it was weakened. Radiant Almighty! It was a slash beyond swordsmanship. With a single swing of his sword, bolstered by the force of Radiant Almighty, a Toy Musashi cut through countless things. No shield could have deflected it. No fortress could have withstood it. Musashi cut through the courtyard, cut through King, cut through the cathedral, cut through Pangloss, cut through the storm. Yes, as King stood there, cut in half, nearly vertically by the attack, a sliver of light peeked out through the black clouds behind him. The red rain had stopped. The flow of blood had, for a moment, ended. King's left arm dropped off his body. It only reacted to the fact that it had been severed once he tried to move it. The cut had been that clean. The old man looked down at the severed limbs, hearing his wooden body beginning to creak and collapse in on itself, and whispered. "He snuck up on you," he said, looking down at his remaining hand. "Where were you looking, fool?" He looked up, and as he did, the fusion tool began to come undone. The metal and wood fell from his head like a flaking paint, revealing the face of the old man beneath. A Toy Musashi stood across from him, gently landing on the ground, smoke rising from his arm. The limb had been scorched by the rebounding force of Radiant Almighty, skin blistered and red. He winced as he held the arm, keeping it still. He looked up with those gray eyes. "I win, King." King smiled sadly, blood slipping from the edges of his mouth. "Indeed," he wheezed. "Quite the blow, a Toy Musashi. I take it that was the force of your resolve." Musashi nodded. "I see." King chuckled, and then he took a step back, towards the edge of the courtyard, the red ocean broiling below. "Then, I wish you luck." And so, without another word, King took a final step backwards, and Levis's body fell into the water. It sank without a sound. A white bird spread its wings and flew off into the horizon, leaving the blood behind. Oh, I thought he would join Musashi's new pet acquired. He would have been like, "I remember you sparing me, what?" Musashi let out a harsh, bloody breath as he fell to the ground. He lay there, cheek pressed against the cold floor, panting for air, breathing in and breathing out. Right now, even that was almost more than he could handle. That last attack hadn't been the last of his reserves. He'd gone far beyond his own strength for that, perhaps too far. He raised his shaking arm, his good one, up to his mouth. With eyes wavering in and out of vision, he looked at the black bracelet there. With a mouth that tasted of blood, he spoke. "Caravan," he grasped, "remaining Contestants. This was the moment of truth. If you survive, whether you surrender or win, do they give you, like, medical attention, or are you on your own? Oh, cool. After dispatching anyone targeting Musashi, the other phases had been instructed to move through the arena, eliminate any other contestants they found, and then surrender themselves. If they'd done as he asked, then he should be the only contestant remaining at this point. But, if they'd betrayed him, if he'd truly shown his back once again... Caravan answered before doubt could continue its monologue. Contestants remaining, 1! The construct declared. The winner is a toy Musashi! A toy Musashi began to laugh. Wow. That was nice. That was good. Here's the thing.
Yeah.
I had a question, as well as among other atheists. So, I think we can agree that, like, the subconscious is different than the consciousness, right?
Of course.
Is it possible if you go unconscious or, like, in a fugue state for, like, your subconscious to have its own aether and core?
Not really.
Okay. I was I was imagining, like, unconscious but still fighting on his feet trope. Like, still throwing punches. The aether wouldn't let him stop. I almost did that in the RP.
You could have an ability to, like, autopilot your body while you're unconscious.
Might have to look into that for Merrick, but that might be too broken. Alright, we have some aether questions. Let me get that open. Let's see. Blur asks, how long did the 1,000 revolutions last?
So the actual war would have been around, like, 20, 30 years, but the, fallout would have continued over the next century, like, with...
Honestly, galaxy-wide, that's pretty fast, all things considered. I guess Aether really caught him off guard.
And there were never
it was, like, everybody of every
tyrants.
Ideology cooperating, right?
Well, it was not everyone. There were, like, loyalists that have been mentioned, but it was very much a very big numbers disparity in Aether also contributed.
Hell yeah. Ainsworth asks a question I know you can't answer for lore reasons. It's what we've been theorizing. But Ainsworth asks, is there a reason why the Gene Tyrants didn't/couldn't use Aether?
There is.
Tan confirmed to me that an automatic with a consciousness could have Aether, and
we've seen that, yeah. There's the Paradisus, the AI from there, one of the ones that featured he had Aether.
Indeed. But also you specified to me, edit this out if this is a secret, that, like, if a Gene Tyrant's consciousness had been moved to an automatic, that they could unlock Aether.
That's right.
So I think it has less to do with, like, they lost their humanity or sacrificed it, more to do with, like, the literal terms of, like, whatever made Aether more common. I did have another fun fact I wanted to ask you. So you mentioned something happened that made people available to get Aether, right? And that technically, in our times, like, people could have gotten Aether, but it would have been so incredibly hard or rare or whatever.
Yes.
Can you name, in the Aetheral Space timeline, in real life, like, a historical figure that had Aether?
No, I cannot.
Oh, why not?
That'd be silly.
Genghis Khan wasn't flaring his Aether?
He wasn't. Maybe he was widening his eyes, but I don't know about Aether.
King George?
No.
George Washington?
No.
Not even
This is a different story.
Aw, fair enough.
This technique has been passed down from George Washington. Heartbeat shotgun.
Did anyone in our times ever unlock Aether?
No.
Wow.
Technically they could have, but the chances were so minuscule that they didn't.
I'm very curious now what happened. Because my main thought was if there was going to be a user in history that had Aether, I thought you were going to go with Rasputin. Because, like, his whole thing was being a magician or whatever. Alright, well, you have it there first, folks. Last question from JT is, are most of the animals we know still around? If not, what has survived or gone extinct?
A lot of them have. You will have, like, they would have gone extinct once upon a time and then brought back by Gene Tyrants, such as what they have now, usually.
Well, my thinking is, you've watched Avatar The Last Airbender, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of things like that as well, where there's, like, mixtures of animals and, like, weird...
I was gonna say, with Gene Tyrants and shit around, probably, where it's like, yes, the cow bear.
Yeah, a lot of these experiments that they did sometimes would escape and, like, just start their own species.
It's also been millennia, so it's
like
not
another example of
for...
extinct one comes out paleo beasts and fucking dinosaurs.
Yeah, that's true. I love paleo.
One of the Gene Tyrants really like dinosaurs.
I like to think that there are actually different species delineations of paleo beasts, where you have the ones that were scientifically accurate with feathers, and then you have the ones where the gene tyrants made with scales because they liked the original
T-Rexes are
science.
substantially bigger, and they're called tyrant lizard kings.
Hell yes. Well, that's pretty much what
Yeah, but
T-Rex
they don't,
means
they don't
anyway.
say the fancy name, they say the tyrant lizard king.
Yeah, they're like, just like me for real. Was there a gene tyrant who presented themselves as a paleo beast?
They would have been dinosaur-esque, but they would not have wanted to be a dinosaur themselves.
Oh.
But they would be like...
They can change their bodies at will. Like anyone who was like, I am the tyrant lizard king, man. But they gave themselves like usable arms and brain.
They would have been like they would have been like humanoid, but with dino features.
Have you ever played a game called Fossil Fighters? I believe it's called. So I need you to go in the Aetheral Space roleplay chat real quick, Tan, and I need you to open up VC text and look at what was just.
Let me have a look. Let me see what was posted there. Let's check a look.
We should probably end the recording since that's taking longer than I expected.
I like
Thank
Bold
you.
Muzazzi.
Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.